Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been best friends with my neighbor since elementary school. We live just a few houses apart, and we pretty much spend every summer together. His mom is like a second mother to me, especially since my parents work long hours at the hospital. They're both nurses, so I often hang out at his place when they're pulling double shifts. This particular day started like any other summer afternoon. I was lounging in my room, probably on my third straight hour of video games, when my friend texted me to come over. His mom was babysitting a little girl around 6 years old, who belonged to one of her close friends from college. The girl's mom had some emergency at work and needed someone to watch her daughter for the day. When I got there, the little girl was sitting at their kitchen counter, swinging her legs and coloring in a princess book, while my friend's mom was preparing dinner. The kitchen smelled amazing. She was making her famous lasagna, which was reason enough for me to stick around. My friend's mom asked us if we would mind taking the little girl outside for a bike ride. She explained that she needed to focus on dinner and that the girl had been cooped up inside all day. My friend simply agreed to his mom's request. The little girl's face lit up immediately. She had brought her small pink bicycle with training wheels, and she was clearly excited to use it. We helped her get her helmet on and headed outside. Everything was fine for the first 10 minutes. We were just going around the block, keeping close to my friend's house, since we weren't sure how far we were allowed to take her. That's when we passed by this house with perfectly manicured lawn, where this woman was standing, apparently inspecting her grass or something. As soon as the little girl rode past on her bike, the woman's head snapped up like she'd just witnessed a crime. She yelled at us to stop right there. The little girl got scared and stopped pedaling. We walked up to see what the problem was. The woman then started lecturing us about how the sidewalk was her property and told us to go right on the streets instead. My friend tried to reason with her, pointing out that the girl was too young for that and that the sidewalk wasn't actually her property. But the woman just got more aggressive, declaring that she didn't care and that she didn't want any girls riding on what she claimed was her property. She actually emphasized the word girls, like it was something offensive. I just dismissed her with a whatever and we kept moving. We kept going, trying to ignore her. The little girl was getting nervous, but we assured her everything was fine. We made a few more rounds because the little girl was having fun. And honestly, I wasn't about to let some random angry woman tell us what to do. Every time we passed her house, she got more and more agitated. She started threatening us, saying she would call the cops if we didn't stop using the sidewalk she claimed was her property. I just dismissed her again, with another whatever. We just kept riding, though we could see her pulling out her phone and frantically dialing. I mean, imagine being so entitled that you'd actually call the police on a 6-year-old girl riding her bike on a public sidewalk. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up beside her house. We were on our third or fourth lap by then, and the officer stepped out just as we were passing by. The woman immediately pointed us out to the officer, demanding that we be arrested for trespassing on her property. The officer looked at us, two 13-year-old boys walking beside a little girl on a pink bike with training wheels, and you could just see the "Are you kidding me?" expression on his face. He tried to explain to the woman that we were just kids, but she kept insisting that we were trespassing by using the sidewalk. The officer had to explain to her multiple times that the sidewalk wasn't her property, but she wouldn't listen, claiming she knew her rights. She even tried arguing that paying taxes made the sidewalk her property. The officer finally had to warn her that if she continued harassing us, he would have to write her up for disorderly conduct. Her face turned so red I thought she might explode. She stomped her foot like a toddler having a tantrum and stormed inside her house, slamming the door so hard her precious lawn ornaments shook. Before leaving, the officer told us to let him know if she harassed us again, mentioning that they'd received several complaints about her from other neighbors. We assured him we would. The little girl was a bit shaken, but we helped her calm down by making silly faces and joking about how the lady probably needed a nap. When we got back to the house, my friend's mom had finished making dinner, and the lasagna was even better than usual. We told her about what happened, and she called the little girl's mom to let her know about the incident just in case. A week later, the city sent workers to repave that section of the sidewalk. They had to park their equipment right in front of Karen's house for 3 whole days. Every time I walked past, I made sure to wave at her while she glared from behind her curtains. I was working as a veterinary nurse at a local animal clinic, eager to put my fresh knowledge to use while I prepared for my licensing exams. The day started normally enough. I was handling the phone when a woman called about her guinea pigs needing treatment. She explained that she had a breeding pair of guinea pigs that got into a fight, claiming they just had some scratches that needed attention, and asked if she could bring them in. I told her she could come in, then asked her to describe the injuries so I could determine whether to schedule her later or treat it as an emergency. She hesitated for a long moment, just saying, When I asked if she could see the animals now, she confirmed she could. I then asked if they were both breathing, which she also confirmed. I pressed her to describe the injuries, explaining that even minor scratches might need antibiotics. She described what seemed like minor injuries. The male supposedly had some scratches, while the female had some wounds that were bleeding slightly. She suggested it probably just needed cleaning and stitches. Given how she described it, I told her it sounded urgent and asked if she could arrive within an hour. She said she was only a few minutes away. She arrived 20 minutes later, but what I saw was nothing like what she described. The male had an injury that needed immediate attention but was treatable. I handed him to the head veterinarian while I checked the female. What I found under the bloodstained papers was far worse than anything she had described. The female was in critical condition with severe injuries that were clearly beyond medical help. I had to take a deep breath to keep my composure. I confronted her about claiming these wounds were minor and would just need cleaning and stitches. Her response was infuriating. She said she didn't want to be judged over the phone, adding that judgmental people were the worst. I explained that these wounds were fatal and nothing could save the animal. She insisted we could just patch her up, give antibiotics, and send her home, claiming the guinea pig would be fine. When I explained that was impossible due to the severity of the injuries and that we'd need to euthanize her, she became angry. She refused, demanding we fix the guinea pig so she could breed her again. I tried explaining that even if we could save her, breeding would be impossible due to the extent of her injuries. That's when she revealed her true colors. She complained that she needed the guinea pig for breeding to make money. I was shocked and asked if she was really putting a few dollars above her animal's welfare while it was suffering. She still refused the euthanasia. The head vet stepped in, warning her that if she wouldn't give permission, we'd have to contact animal welfare authorities. She scoffed at this, claiming it wasn't real and threatening to call the police and sue us for animal abuse. I was stunned that she wanted to charge us with abuse for humanely euthanizing a suffering animal. While the head vet called animal welfare, she called emergency services, making wild accusations. When the police arrived, they were visibly disturbed by the animal's condition. We got permission to euthanize and she left hurling abuse while being forced to pay. But the story doesn't end there. 2 days later, she showed up with a very sick snake. My heart sank when I realized what she'd done. She'd fed the euthanized guinea pig to her snake, casually explaining it was easier than waiting for proper snake food to thaw. The snake was now critically ill from the medication that had been in the guinea pig system. Once again, we needed welfare authority permission to euthanize. Once again, she called the police. The same officers arrived looking completely done with the situation. This time, though, they arrested her after checking her history of animal abuse. At the court hearing months later, we learned this wasn't her first offense. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail and a massive fine to be donated to animal rescue. She received a lifetime ban on owning animals, and animal welfare officers seized all her remaining pets. The healthy ones were rehomed, though sadly many were too ill to save. To this day, they still do random checks to ensure she hasn't gotten any new animals. I practically grew up in the telecommunications industry. My father owns a repair company, and since I hated daycare as a kid, I spent every summer helping him out and learning everything from welding to rigging cell tower antennas. When I dropped out of college at 19, I decided to get my certifications and join the family business. Recently, my father landed a huge contract and hired 5 new guys. He made me and another veteran employee crew leads to manage all the repair projects. I got stuck with this guy in his 40s who'd been fired from multiple physical therapy clinics. He was basically unhireable anywhere else, but he had this massive superiority complex because he had a bachelor's degree, which apparently made him better than us mere tradesmen. On our first day at the site for a major client, we were tasked with taking down old antennas and installing new ones. After morning meetings at the hotel with my father and the client over video call, the other crew lead and I drove to the site with lunch for everyone. The other crew lead realized he'd forgotten his hard hat at the hotel and told me he'd be back in 30 minutes. I wasn't worried since it was a simple job I'd done countless times with my father. I put the sandwiches in the refrigerated server room and went to check on Mr. Bachelor's degree, who was using a trailer hitch winch to lift a brand new antenna up the tower. Our other guys were waiting at the top, about 700 feet up, to install it. The antenna was about 150 feet up when I noticed something wrong. I pointed out to him that the fasteners were on backwards, explaining that they needed to be perfect due to the increased wind and tension on the winch as the antenna got higher. He dismissed my concern, claiming they were fine. I insisted they were backwards, but he told me to go away, calling me a bootlicker. I tried one more time to warn him that the antenna would drop if he didn't bring it down and fix it, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he sneered that he didn't have to take orders from someone half his age who couldn't make it through college, adding that I was only there because I was the boss's kid who couldn't make it in the real world. Right as he finished his little speech, I heard the winch crack. I grabbed him and pulled us both into the server shelter, crushing all the sandwiches in the process. The winch flew out of the hitch mount, and the antenna dropped like a rock onto the truck, cutting straight through the cab and into the ground underneath. I confronted him about his poor rigging and his failure to secure the winch to the truck with a pin. He tried to deny responsibility, but I had to point out that not only was it his fault, but now I had to explain to both the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and our insurance how we'd managed to damage over $70,000 in equipment and $30,000 in our client's equipment on the first day of this job. I spent the rest of the day making calls to the Safety Administration, my father, our insurance, and my mother, who's our accountant, to file all the necessary reports. I had to reassure the other crew guys their paychecks wouldn't be affected and promised to replace their crushed lunches. After finishing the end-of-day reports, my father called and told me to fire him for negligence. When I started to tell him he was being let go, explaining that we couldn't risk another incident like this, he interrupted me and declared that I couldn't fire him. The other crew lead stepped in, assuring him that I absolutely could fire him and offered to do it himself if needed, suggesting we could take it up with the boss tomorrow if he didn't believe us. He demanded we go talk to the boss right then and there. It was only 4 p.m., but this guy made us drive 3 hours, interrupted my family's dinner, and sat smugly on the couch in my father's home office. My father absolutely lost it, screaming at him about costing the company $100,000 and potentially losing a major contract. He even told him he was filing a civil suit for negligence since I'd specifically warned him about his mistake. The guy tried to dismiss me again, questioning what a kid could possibly know. My father shot back that he'd taught me how to rig a winch when I was 8, and I'd done it right, pointing out that this 40-year-old man had managed to crush an entire truck. He then ordered him to get out of the house. The guy stormed out. A week later, we got notice he was trying to sue us for wrongful termination. His case got thrown out pretty quick when we showed the judge the Safety Administration report, the insurance claim, and the photos of the crushed truck. The judge even ordered him to pay our legal fees. I heard he was trying to get his old physical therapy job back, but apparently they weren't too keen on hiring someone who destroyed $100,000 worth of equipment because he was too proud to listen to his supervisor. I've always been passionate about cars. My dad owned a small auto repair shop, and I spent countless weekends there learning about engines, transmissions, and everything in between. After college, I tried the corporate world for a few years, but it never felt right. When my wife suggested I pursue something I actually loved, it hit me. I should become a car salesman. I landed a trainee position at one of the biggest dealerships in town. The pay wasn't great to start, but the potential was there, and more importantly, I'd be working with cars all day. My first month went smoothly, my sales manager was supportive, and most of my colleagues were helpful. Then came my encounter with the finance lady. She wasn't my direct superior. She worked in the finance department handling paperwork for completed sales. I'd seen her around, always dressed in expensive suits and heels, walking around like she owned the place. I hadn't interacted with her much until that day. I was reviewing some paperwork at my desk when she approached me. She started by asking if I was the new guy, to which I confirmed I'd been there about a month. She then mentioned she'd heard I was married, and I acknowledged this was true. The question that came next caught me off guard. She asked where my wife worked, her tone oddly aggressive. I told her my wife worked in retail. She immediately pressed for more details, wanting to know which store specifically. I hesitantly mentioned it was at the mall, trying to be vague. She insisted on knowing exactly which store, declaring that she was going to go there. Her intensity was making me uncomfortable. When I merely mentioned that my wife worked full-time, she demanded to know my wife's name and insisted I show her photos. At this point, alarm bells were ringing in my head. Why was she so interested in my wife? And why was she practically interrogating me? I politely asked her to calm down and questioned why she needed all this information about my wife. Her face turned red instantly. She erupted, asking how dare I speak to her like that, claiming she was just trying to be friendly. I responded that rapid-fire questions about my wife's workplace and demanding to see her photos didn't feel very friendly. She became even more agitated, demanding if I knew who she was. When I simply stated that she worked in the finance department, she declared herself as my manager and warned me to watch what I said to both customers and her. I tried to apologize while pointing out that she wasn't actually my manager, but before I could finish mentioning my sales manager, she cut me off with a threatening, "Be careful." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. I was fuming but kept my cool. Later that day, I spoke with my actual sales manager about the incident. When I explained everything, including how uncomfortable her questioning made me feel and her subsequent threats, he revealed this wasn't the first time she'd done something like this and expressed gratitude that I'd come forward. When I asked if there was a pattern, he confirmed she'd had several complaints about overstepping boundaries and promised to speak with the general manager. The next day, the general manager called me into his office. The finance lady was there looking smug. The general manager stated he understood there had been an incident yesterday. The finance lady immediately jumped in, claiming I had been extremely rude to her when she was just being friendly. That's when I mentioned I had security footage from my desk area that caught our entire interaction, including her aggressive questioning and threats. The smugness vanished from her face. When the general manager asked about the security footage, I explained that my wife actually worked in cybersecurity, not retail, and given some recent identity theft attempts at other dealerships, she had suggested I always ensure my interactions were recorded. I told him the camera above my desk captured everything. I hadn't told the finance lady what my wife really did because her questioning seemed suspicious. The security footage part was true. All sales floors had cameras, but I'd never specifically requested any footage. I just wanted to see her reaction. The general manager reviewed the footage that afternoon. By the end of the week, the finance lady was gone. Apparently, my incident was the final straw in a long list of complaints about her harassing employees for personal information and abusing her position. My sales manager later told me she had been involved in some identity theft schemes at her previous workplace, which explained her intense interest in employees' personal information. She never got to visit my wife at her fictional retail job, and I never had to use the C word. I've been thinking of. I'm still at the dealership, now a full-fledged salesman. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have gone if I hadn't stood up to her that day. I'm just glad I trusted my instincts and kept my cool, even when she was doing her best to provoke me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.